Hello, good afternoon to all of you. Yes, now as I have discussed last week, today I'm going to cover LKS 8, 10 and 37 together, and if time permits, LKS 16, and then we'll move into LKS 17. We might not have enough time today to cover all the standards, but at least as many standards as possible with MCQs, we'll try to cover today. So I'm going to discuss these standards in the form of MCQs, as I have mentioned before, because I believe that is the easiest way to learn standards, and also the finer points in various standards will be easily remembered in the form of MCQs. So we'll start with the first lesson today, or we'll start with the first standard today, which is LKS 8. LKS 8, as you know, it's about accounting policies and changes in accounting estimates. So we are going to start with LKS 10. Let me share my screen with you. Some are in the waiting room, some are in the breakout room. Right. So let me put that into the presentation mode. We'll start with LKS 8. So my name is Ruchira Pereira. So as I told you, I'll be discussing these MCQs in the form of, I'll be discussing these standards in the form of MCQs. So today we are going to start with LKS 8, and then depending on the time, we'll move into other standards such as 10, 37, 16, and 17. Right. So starting with LKS 8, which is about accounting policies, changes in accounting estimates and errors. Let's look at the MCQs that I have developed based on the standard. The term accounting policies. The term accounting policies refers to, first answer, the accounting principles applied by an entity, the accounting concepts and conventions adopted by an entity, the measurement basis used by an entity, all of the above. So what do you think is the correct answer? Accounting policies mean what? Accounting principles applied by an entity, accounting concepts and conventions adopted by an entity, the measurement basis used by an entity, or all of the above. Correct answer is all these definitions define accounting policies. Therefore, the correct answer is all of the above. So for question number 1, correct answer is all of the above. So I will update the Excel screen also at the same time. LKS 8. So question number 1, correct answer is answer 4. Answer 4, answer D. I can put here question number and the answer. So for question number 1, correct answer is answer 4. So we'll go back to the presentation. Question number 2. If an accounting standard applies specifically to a certain item, an entity's accounting policy in relation to that item must normally be determined by applying the relevant standard. True or false? This statement is true. So the correct answer for question number 2 is first answer, or the answer which says as true. Basically, what it is asking is, if an accounting standard applies specifically to a certain item, an entity's accounting policy in relation to that item must normally be determined by applying the relevant standard. Of course, the answer is true. So let me update Excel sheet for question number 2. The correct answer is answer 1. The answer which says as true. Question number 3. An entity may change one of its accounting policies whenever it wishes to do so. Never. If this would result in the provision of reliable and more relevant information, if this would reduce the cost of preparing the financial statements. Normally, an entity, which means an organization, may change one of its accounting policies if the change will result in more reliable and relevant information. So the correct answer for 3 is answer number 3. Correct answer for 3 is also answer number 3. Question number 4. A change in accounting policy which does not result from the initial application of an international standard must normally be accounted for either retrospectively or prospectively. Prospectively, unless it is impracticable to do so, retrospectively, prospectively. Now, you need to understand the meaning of these two words, retrospectively and prospectively. Retrospectively means you are making a change or you are making an adjustment in a way that it is applicable for prior years also. Prospectively means forgetting the prior years, applying the change in the accounting standard only for the future years. So this is the difference between the two words, retrospectively and prospectively. If it is retrospectively, then of course we are adjusting the previous year's financial statements also. But if it is prospectively, forgetting the previous years, we are making the change or we are making the adjustment only for the future financial statements. So what it is asking is a change in an accounting policy which does not result from the initial application of an international standard must normally be accounted for. What's the correct answer out of these 4? Either retrospectively or prospectively. Prospectively, unless it is impractical to do so. Retrospectively or prospectively. Correct answer is answer 3. Retrospectively. You need to make the change as it is applicable for prior years also. So for question number 4, correct answer is answer 3. Question number 5. For all changes in accounting policy, the entity concerned must disclose. So what are the things it should disclose if the change in the accounting policy? The title of the international standard that has caused the change to occur, the nature of the change, the reasons which suggest that the change will provide reliable and relevant information, the fact that the change has been accounted for in accordance with transitional provisions specified in the applicable standard. So basically, if you are changing an accounting policy, the entity concerned should disclose the nature of the change. In other words, why you are doing the change. In other words, the impact of the change, the nature of the change, everything has to be disclosed. So the correct answer out of the 4 answers given here is answer number 2, nature of the change. Question number 6. A change in an accounting estimate should be accounted for either retrospectively or prospectively. Prospectively, retrospectively, unless it is impractical to do so. So basically, if there's a change in an accounting estimate, that account that prospectively. That is, the change will apply only for the future periods. The correct answer is answer 2. So question number 6, correct answer is answer 2. The use of estimates always undermines the reliability of financial statements. True or false? It is false. Most of the time when preparing financial statements, we'll have to estimate various figures. So just because we estimate, it doesn't undermine the reliability of financial statements. So this statement is incorrect. So the correct answer is false here. Correct answer is false. Accounting estimates can be many. Even the useful lifetime of an asset can be an accounting estimate. But just because of estimates, the reliability of financial statements will not be undermined. Prior period errors could be caused by mistakes in applying accounting policies, fraud, mathematical errors, any of the above. Prior period errors. So prior period errors are the errors which occurred in a previous period. So prior period errors can be caused by mistakes when you try to apply accounting policies in the past. Prior period errors can occur due to fraud, mathematical errors, or any of the above. So out of the four answers given here, the correct answer is the last answer, any of the above, because all the three previous reasons can cause prior period errors. So for question number 8, correct answer is answer 4. Question number 9. A material prior period error should be corrected prospectively unless it is impracticable to do so. Prospectively, just prospectively, retrospectively, either retrospectively or prospectively. So if the prior period error is material, then of course you have to adjust the financial statements. So you have to correct the financial statements retrospectively. So correct answer is answer 3. An entity's financial statements provide comparative figures for the previous 5 accounting periods. So their financial statements. So in a particular company's financial statements give comparative figures for last 5 periods. If the entity accounts for an item retrospectively, then comparative figures are restated for the prior accounting period, but never for the 4 previous accounting periods. Comparative figures for the previous 5 accounting periods are not restated in any circumstances. Comparative figures for all the previous 5 accounting periods may need to be restated. The entity may choose whether or not to restate comparative figures. So, of course, if you are present in comparative figures for 5 periods, and if there's a change, then of course the change has to be accounted retrospectively. Change has to be accounted retrospectively for all the 5 accounting periods. So basically, the correct answer out of the 4 answers is answer C. Comparative figures for all the previous 5 accounting periods need to be restated. You can't do it for 1 year and forget the other 4 years. You cannot stay without adjusting any financial statements, any previous financial statements, and there is no option for you to decide whether to do it or not to do it. You have to do it, and you have to do it for all the 5 previous accounting periods. So the correct answer for question number 10 is answer 3. Answer 3. Question number 10, correct answer is answer 3. Question number 11. Which of the following is a change of an accounting policy? Changing from the cost model to the revaluation model when measuring items of property, plant, and equipment. So if you change the model from cost model to revaluation model when you are measuring property, plant, and equipment, so is that a change of an accounting policy? Correcting of an error found in the previous financial statements, error correction, is that an accounting policy? Revising the residual value of a depreciable non-current asset, is that a change in an accounting policy? Change in the depreciation method used in relation to depreciable non-current asset. So out of these 4, which is an example for a change in an accounting policy? Out of these 4, the example for a change in an accounting policy is the first answer, that is change in the measurement method of measuring the values of property, plant, and equipment from cost model to revaluation model. So the correct answer for question number 11 is answer 1. Answer 1. So for question number 11, correct answer is answer 1. Question number 12. When preparing its financial statements for 2016, a company discovered an error in 2015 financial statements. 2015 revenue figure should have been 102 million, but was erroneously reported as 100 million. This difference is regarded as material. So something which is 102 million were recorded as 100 million when it comes to revenue. So you have understated revenue by 2 million. So it is considered as a material mistake. The comparative figure for revenue shown in 2016 financial statement should be 100 million, 100 million within brackets it says, but the error should then be explained in the notes to the financial statements. Either 100 million or 102 million as the company sees fit. 102 million. So what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? I repeat, when preparing the financial statements of 2016, a company discovers an error in 2015 financial statements. 2015 revenue figure should have been 102 million, but was erroneously reported as 100 million. This difference is regarded as material. The comparative figure for revenue shown in 2016 financial statement should be 100 million. Second answer, 100 million within brackets, but error should then be explained in the notes to the financial statements. Either 100 million or 102 million as the company sees fit. 102 million. What do you think? What do you think is the correct answer, correct approach to correct this mistake that happened in the previous year? It is asking the comparative figure. Comparative figure for revenue shown in 2016 financial statement. In other words, okay, in 2016 you will have a revenue figure. So when you are comparing 2016 revenue with 2015 revenue, which figure you should have used? 100 million or 102 million? Correct answer is answer C here. It can be either 100 million or 102 million as the company sees fit. If you correct the error, if you correct the prior period error, then of course you will show it as 102 million, or else you can show it as 100 million, but within brackets you can, or within brackets or in notes you can explain the error. So the correct answer, if we strictly go by the treatment that is expected, it is either 100 million or 102 million. It is up to the company. Company can either keep the figure as 100 million, but can give an explanation later, or they can change the mistake to reflect 102 million. So the correct answer out of the 4 answers here is answer 3. For question number 12, correct answer is answer 3. That's a question. How about the 4th answer for 11? So let's go back to question 11. Change in the depreciation method used in relation to a depreciable, okay. Change in the depreciation method used in relation to that's an estimate. That's not an accounting policy. If you change the measurement basis, if you change the measurement basis from cost model to revaluation model, then of course it's a change of an accounting policy. But the 4th answer, change in the depreciation method use, that is maybe from straight line method to reducing balance method or for sum of digits method, that's an accounting estimate. By estimating the depreciation figure. Change in the depreciation method used in relation to a depreciable non-current asset, that is not an example for a change in an accounting policy. Right. So question number 12 with regard to LKS 8, we just finished. We came back to question 11. It is either 100 million or 102 million as the company sees fit. Right. So with that, I conclude LKS 8. So for LKS 8, I have selected 12 MCQs, which we have just completed. So now let me move into LKS 10 and LKS 37. Now here I have combined both standards because both standards are closely related. LKS 10 as well as LKS 37. LKS 10 relate to events after the reporting period. LKS 37 relates to provisions, contingent liabilities, and contingent assets. Right. Let me share my screen again. LKS 37, provisions and events after the reporting period. So I hope you all can see the screen. LKS 37 and LKS 10 together, provisions, contingent liabilities, and contingent assets, and also events after the reporting period. Right. First question. LKS 37 defines a provision as a reduction in the carried amount of an asset, a liability which is legally enforceable, a liability of uncertain timing or amount, a liability which is not legally enforceable. So what is a provision? What is a provision? It is a liability. As per the standard, it's a liability of uncertain timing. We don't know when it will happen. When we may have to settle the liability. When it occurs, we have no idea. A liability of uncertain timing and amount. So the correct answer is answer 3. LKS 37 and 10. Question 1. Correct answer is 3. Question number 2. In order that a provision should be recognized in an entity's financial statements, it is necessary that the entity has a legally enforceable obligation, the entity has a present obligation, it is possible that an outflow of economic benefits will be required, the entity has a constructive obligation. So understand the question first. In order that a provision should be recognized in an entity's financial statements. So for you to recognize a provision in the financial statements, it is necessary to fulfill which conditions? Entity has a legally enforceable obligation. Entity has a present obligation. It is possible that an outflow of economic benefits will be required in the future. The entity has a constructive obligation. What's the correct answer? You can tell me. For you to recognize a provision. What's the correct answer? The entity has a legally enforceable obligation. The entity has a present obligation. It is possible that an outflow of economic benefits will be required. Possible. The entity has a constructive obligation. Correct answer is answer 3. So for question number 2, correct answer is answer 3. Question number 3. A past event is an obligating event only if it gives rise to a legally enforceable obligation. I repeat, a past event is an obligating event only if it gives rise to a legally enforceable obligation. True or false? It is, of course, false, incorrect. Even if it is not legally enforceable, it can be obligated. It can be obligated. So for question number 3, correct answer is false. Also answer 2. The amount of a provision, question number 4. The amount of a provision should be the best estimate of the expenditure required to settle the obligation concerned. So this estimate should not be adjusted to reflect future events that may affect the amount of the required expenditure, whether or not those events are likely to occur. Should be the amount that would rationally be paid to settle or transfer the obligation. Must always be made on the basis of advice from independent experts. Should always be discounted to present value. So first understand the question. The amount of a provision, the value of a provision, the amount of a provision should be the best estimate of the expenditure required to settle the obligation. So what is this estimate? What is this estimate? First answer should not be adjusted to reflect future events which may affect the amount of the required expenditure, whether or not those events are likely to occur. Should be the amount that would rationally be paid to settle or transfer the obligation, must always be made on the basis of advice from independent experts, should always be discounted to present value. Correct answer is obviously no, not the first answer. Correct answer is answer 2. I mean, the best estimate of a provision is the likely amount that you may have to pay in the future in order to settle the obligation. So for question number 4, correct answer is answer 2. Question number 5. So if a provision relates to a large population of items, the amount of the provision should be calculated as number 1, the expected value of the expenditure that will be required to settle the obligation, the maximum expenditure that could possibly be required to settle the obligation, the minimum expenditure that could possibly be required to settle the obligation, the present value of the maximum expenditure that could possibly be required to settle the obligation. So I repeat the question. If a provision relates to a large population of items, so if you are creating a provision, for a number of items, for a large population of items, the amount of the provision, how should you calculate the value of the provision? First answer, the expected value of the expenditure that will be required to settle the obligation, the maximum expenditure that could possibly be required to settle the obligation, the minimum expenditure that could possibly be required to settle the obligation, the present value of the maximum expenditure that could possibly be required to settle the obligation. Of course, the correct answer is what? You have to create a provision for a large population of items. So how should you calculate the value of the provision? It should be what? It should be answer 1, expected value of the expenditure. Expected value of the expenditure that will be required to settle the obligation. So the correct answer is answer 1 for question number 5. Question number 5. So question number 6. Should the provision be recognized in relation to future operating losses, onerous contracts? Onerous contracts. So what do you think? A, yes, B, no. That is, there are 2 answers for each answer here. A, no, B, no, both no. C, both yes. D, A, no, B, yes. So what do you think? Should you recognize the provision in relation to future operating losses? No. With regard to onerous contracts? Yes. So the correct answer is answer 4. Correct answer is answer 4. Question 7. In general terms, a contingent liabilities is a possible obligation that depends upon the outcome of a future event that is within the control of the entity. Right or wrong? In general terms, a contingent liability is a possible obligation that depends upon the outcome of a future event that is within the control of the entity. True or false? That is false. Now that is beyond the control of the entity. First of all, you need to understand contingent liabilities are beyond the control of the entity. So you don't know what will happen as for the outcome, and also you don't know how much you may have to settle in the future. So this statement is incorrect. 7. Correct answer is answer 2. Number 8, contingent liabilities are, number 1, always recognized in the statement of financial position. Recognized in the statement of financial position unless the possibility of an outflow of economic benefits is removed. Disclosed in the notes unless the possibility of an outflow of economic benefits is removed. Always disclosed in the notes to the financial statement. So what do you think is the correct answer? What do you think is the correct answer? Answer number 3. You disclose in the notes. Contingent liabilities you disclose in the notes unless, of course, the possibility is very remote. So if the possibility is remote, you will not make a disclosure. But if there's a possibility of something happening in the future, then you will disclose in the notes. So correct answer is answer C or answer 3. Question number 8, correct answer is 3. Question number 9. Contingent assets. Contingent assets are always disclosed in the notes to the financial statements. Disclosed in the notes unless an inflow of economic benefits is only remotely possible. Disclosed in the notes if an inflow of economic benefits is only probable. Always recognize the statement of financial position. Now, contingent assets, for you to recognize assets, especially contingent assets, there should be a probability that future economic benefits are there. In other words, only if it is probable that there may be future economic benefits, then you should disclose contingent assets in the notes. Contingent liabilities, I go back to the previous question. There we have discussed contingent liabilities to recognize if there's a possibility, unless the possibility is very remote of something happening in the future, of a liability happening in the future. So there we have said contingent liabilities you need to disclose in the notes unless the possibility is very remote. But for you to recognize contingent assets in the notes, there should be a probability that in the future, some sort of benefits might accrue to the company. In other words, there should be a probability, a significant probability that an inflow, a future inflow might happen to the company. So the correct answer for contingent assets is answer 3. Disclose in the notes if an inflow of economic benefits is only probable. So for question number 9, correct answer is answer 3. Now we'll move into events after the reporting period. LKS 10. LKS 10 requires that financial statements should be adjusted to take account of any events occurring between the end of the reporting period and the date when the financial statements are authorized for issue. True or false? True or false? Is the statement correct? Any events? LKS 10 requires that financial statements should be adjusted to take account of any events. It was highlighted also. This word was highlighted in the question. So LKS 10, does it require for you to adjust all the events between these two dates? No, not all the events. So the statement is incorrect. So the correct answer is answer 2. Correct answer is answer 2. Company is preparing its financial statements for the year to 31st of March 2016. Assuming that each of the following events occur after 31st of March 2016, but before the financial statements are authorized for issue, which one of them should be classified as a non-adjusting event? So, what is the non-adjusting event? All other events are therefore adjusting. Number 1, the bankruptcy of a customer who owed a substantial amount to the company as at 31st of March 2016. So if a customer has gone bankrupt after 31st of March 2016, definitely it should be adjusted. Discovery of a major fraud which occurred in January 2016. So after 31st March, you discovered something bad has happened in January 2016, that should be adjusted. a change in tax rates that is announced in April 2016 and which has a material impact on the tax liability for the year to 31st of March 2016. So tax rate has changed in April 2016, and as a result of that, tax liability for the financial year ending 31st March 2016 can significantly change. Now, that is not adjusted. That is not an adjusting event. We'll look at number 4 also, sales of inventories which were held on, I think something is missing here. So basically, I can say out of the 4 answers, the incorrect answer or the non-adjusted event is answer 3. For question number 11, the correct answer is answer 3. Question number 12. Although the accounting treatment of inventories is prescribed by, this is LKS2, okay? Last week we learned LKS2, the international standard is IAS2. Although the accounting treatment of inventories is prescribed by IAS2 inventories, the company may also need to apply LKS7, LKS10 events after the reporting period when determining inventory figures, which should be shown in the financial statements. True or false? Which is true. That is true, especially after the end of the financial year, after preparing the financial statements, after the end of the financial year, before the financial statements are authorized to issue. If something significant, something like Corona, COVID-19 has happened, and as a result of that, if inventory values have significantly come down, the net realizable value of inventories have come down below the cost, then of course, inventories have to be adjusted. So the statement given here is correct. So what it says is, although the accounting treatment of inventories is prescribed by IAS2, yes, as at 31st of March, let's say 2020, let's take this year, as at 31st of March 2020, nothing has happened. So inventories were based on cost because cost was less than the NRV, but after 31st of March 2020, because of COVID-19, let's say NRV of inventories has come down. So since the NRV has come down, before the financial statements are authorized to show, now the inventory should be adjusted. The value of inventory should be adjusted for the lower value, which is NRV. Now the NRV is less than cost. So therefore, you have to revalue inventories. You have to recalculate the value of inventories and cost of sales based on net realizable value. So that is what the statement says. Although the accounting treatment of inventories is prescribed by IAS2 inventories, the company may also need to apply LKS10 events after the reporting period when determining the inventory figure which should be shown in the financial statements, right or wrong, or true or false. Statement is true. So question number 12, statement is true. There's a comment. If we sold out damaged inventory in the last year, okay. If we sold out damaged inventory in last year, for which year? I don't get your question. You're asking if we sold out damaged inventory in the last year, okay. In which year we need to adjust? In that year. If some inventory got damaged, and if you are selling those inventories maybe for a lesser value, then of course that should be adjusted for that year, not for this year, right? So basically, those are the questions. Those are the questions I have picked for LKS 37 and also for LKS 10. So here we have covered basically provisions, contingent liabilities, contingent assets, and also events after the reporting period. Right. So we'll now move into LKS 16, property, plant, and equipment. Property, plant, and equipment. Again, a very important standard where most of the students make a lot of mistakes in exams. Property, plant, and equipment. So give me 1 second. So in LKS 16, let me share the screen with you. Property, plant, and equipment. Let's discuss these questions also as quickly as possible. So LKS 16, question number 1. Which of the following items qualifies as property, plant, and equipment? Computer software bought for use in more than one accounting period. A machine bought for use in more than one accounting period. A machine bought for resale to a customer. A machine bought for use during a single accounting period. So out of the 4 examples given, which qualifies as property, plant, and equipment? Answer number 2, a machine bought for use in more than one accounting period. It is not about computer softwares. It is not a machine bought for resale purposes. It is not a machine bought for one accounting period. So the answer for question number 1 is answer 2. So we can say here, LKS 16. For question number 1, correct answer is answer 2. Question number 2. The carrying amount of an item of property, plant, and equipment generally refers to the depreciable amount of the item, the amount at which the item is recognized in the financial statements, the cost of the item, replacement cost of the item. Correct answer is again answer number 2, the amount at which we are showing the property, plant, and equipment in the financial statement, or the item in the financial statement. So the correct answer is answer 2. Depreciable amount is the original depreciable value, that is cost minus scrap value. So that is not the value at which we are showing the property, plant, and equipment in the financial statements. We are showing the financial statements and the carrying value. Number 3, a company pays 40,000 rupees to replace a major component of a factory machine. The faulty component that is replaced is sold for 2,000 rupees. The carrying amount of the machine just before this replacement occurs is 450,000. So there was a faulty component which they just sold for 2,000 rupees. The carrying amount of the machine before the replacement 450,000, replacement cost 40,000 rupees, of which 10,000 relates to the faulty component of, sorry, out of 450,000, 10,000 is the cost of the faulty component. The revised carrying amount of the machine after the replacement occurs and the profit or loss on the disposal of the faulty component. So there are 2 requirements here. I can give you 2 minutes. Can you work out here? You bought a new component for 40,000 rupees, and by selling the component, previous component, you got 2,000 rupees. Carrying amount of the machine before the sale was 450,000, out of which 10,000 was the cost of the faulty component. So the question is about the revised cost. The revised cost of the machine and the profit or loss on the sale of the component. So 2 minutes, work out. How much is the carrying amount of the new machine and the profit or loss on the faulty component, on the sale of faulty component? The correct answer is what? Correct answer is answer 1. Answer 1. Let me show you how it comes. Let me work out here. I'll work out the questions in a different Excel sheet. LKS 16. Question number 3. We know the total carrying value of the machine. Total carrying value of the machine was 480,000. Total carrying value of the machine 480,000. Out of which 10,000 related to the component that we just disposed. Carrying value of the component. Carrying value of the component disposed. That is 10,000. So you remove that and then you add back the carrying value of the new item, which is 40,000 rupees. This is 450,000, sorry. Carrying value of the new item. Carrying value of the new component. Or let's say replacement value. That's the replacement value. Replacement value of the new component. 40,000. Therefore, total carrying value. Total carrying value. This is the revised carrying value. So revised total carrying value would be 480,000. As you can see, this is how we obtain that answer, 480,000. Revised carrying value. Then of the item you dispose component, of that the carrying value is 10,000 at the time of disposal. Carrying value 10,000, but you could realize only 2,000. Realized value. Therefore, there's a loss on disposal. Therefore, there's a loss on disposal of 8,000. Therefore, the correct answer would be carrying value 480,000 and the loss on disposal 8,000. So out of the 4 answers given, correct answer is answer 1. As you can see, carrying amount is 480,000, loss is 8,000. So out of the 4 answers, correct answer is answer 1. Question number 3. Let's move into question number 4. Which of the following would not be included in the cost of an item of property, plant, and equipment? So basically, it is asking out of the list given, which would not be included in the cost of an item of property, plant, and equipment. Site preparation cost, testing cost, refundable value added tax, delivery and installation charges. Of course, we know site preparation cost we need to consider, testing cost we need to consider, delivery and installation charges we need to consider. So only odd item here out of the 4 items given is refundable value added tax. So that we don't consider when we calculate the cost of an item of property, plant, and equipment. So the correct answer for question number 4 is answer 3. Question number 5. On 31st of December 2014, a company acquires land for 500,000 rupees. The land is revalued at 530,000 on 31st of December 2015, and again for 460,000 on 31st of December 2016. The company prepares the financial statements to the 31st of December each year and uses the revaluation model. Are they using the revaluation model in relation to land? The correct accounting treatment of each revaluation. So there are two revaluations, remember, in 2015 and 2016. The correct accounting treatment of each revaluation in the statement of comprehensive income. So this asset was bought on 31st of December 2014. So you can assume 1st January 2015. And after 1 year, exactly on 31st of December 2015, the land was revalued for 530,000. So since it was revalued, what we do is we credit to the revaluation reserve account and we show that in the other comprehensive income for the year ending 31st of December 2015. So for the year ending 31st of December 2015, other comprehensive income, or we call it as OCI, will be credited by 30,000 in the name of revaluation reserve. Then in the following year, in the year ending 31st of December 2016, asset value has come down. Asset value has come down by 70,000 rupees compared to 31st of December 2015. Now this come down in the value or reduction in the value of the asset has two components. First, it has the previous revaluation gain of 30,000, which we recognized in the previous year, and further 40,000 reduction in value in the current year. So the reduction in value by 30,000, which relates to the previous revaluation, we debit to the revaluation reserve account and show as a negative figure in other comprehensive income. The remaining 40,000 reduction in the value we show as an expense or as a loss in the profit or loss statement. So out of the four answers given, correct answer would be answer 3. In 2015, we credit other comprehensive income 30,000 in the name of revaluation reserve, and in 2016, the 30,000 credited in the previous year we debit now to the other comprehensive income as a revaluation reserve reversal, and the remaining 40,000 reduction in value we charge as an expense to the profit or loss statement. So the correct answer would be answer 3 for question number 5. Right. Let's move into question number 6. Depreciation is defined as the fall in value of an asset during an accounting period. True or false? It is not. Depreciation is not defined as the fall in value. So the statement is incorrect. Depreciation is defined as the systematic allocation of cost of an asset over its useful lifetime. It is not the fall in value of an asset. So the statement is incorrect. So for question number 6, answer is false, which is answer 2. Question 7. On 1st of January 2015, a company which prepares financial statements to 31st of December each year buys an item of equipment for 20,000 rupees. Useful life is estimated to be 6 years and residual value is expected to be approximately 1,500. Useful life is 6 years, residual value is 1,500. The company uses the diminishing balance method of depreciation at a rate of 35% per annum. Then to the nearest pound or to the nearest rupee, depreciation of this item for the year to 31st of December 2016. For the year to 31st of December 2016. So it's not difficult, it's an easy calculation. You can work out on your own. So I'll give you 2 minutes. Do the calculation on your own. So for the year ending 31st of December 2016, you have to be very careful here because the asset was bought on 1st January 2015. So from 1st January 2015 to 31st of December 2016, you remember now we are in the second year, not in the first year. So what is the correct answer and how we are going to calculate? Question 7. Let me work out here. Question 7. It says asset was bought on 1st of January 2015 for 20,000. That was the cost. Residual value 1,500. Depreciation rate, residual reducing balance method. Depreciation rate is 35%. 35% reducing balance method. So we know for the year ending 31st of December 2015. For the year ending 31st of December 2015, we know how to calculate the depreciation under reducing balance method. We don't deduct the residual value. We multiply the cost by the depreciation rate. So since it is the first year, we just multiply the cost by the depreciation rate. We don't deduct residual value. So the depreciation for the first year or for the year ending 31st of December 2015 is 7,000 rupees. But when we calculate depreciation for the second year ending 31st of December 2016, this is what we do. From the original cost, which is 20,000, we deduct previous year's depreciation since we only had 1 year. Again, we don't deduct residual value, but we multiply by depreciation rate. So for the second year or for the year ending 31st of December 2016, depreciation is 4,550. 4,550. So the correct answer is answer 1. Correct answer is answer 1. 7. Correct answer is answer 1. Question number 8. Borrowing costs which are directly attributable to the acquisition of a qualifying asset must be capitalized as part of the cost of the asset. Yes. So if there's a borrowing cost that you can directly identify for a particular asset or for the acquisition of a particular asset, that has to be capitalized as a part of the cost of the asset. So correct answer is answer 1. That's a true statement. So question number 9. A company has the following general borrowings. A company has the following general borrowings outstanding throughout the whole of an accounting year. So they have a 6.5% bank loan of 400,000 rupees, which means the value of the loan is 400,000, interest rate 6.5%, 8% bank loan of 800,000 rupees, again similar. If a qualified asset costing 50,000 rupees is funded out of these general borrowings, what should be the capitalization rate? Capitalization rate that should be applicable. 6.5%, 7.5%, 8%, 7.25%. What do you think? There are 2 loans. One is at 6.5% for a value of 400,000. Another one is at 8% for a value of 800,000. And now they're going to purchase an asset for 50,000 rupees. So the question is, what should be the capitalization rate? So how to answer this? So what should be the capitalization rate to capitalize this 50,000 rupees, which they have spent on the new asset? Okay, let us work it out. Question number 9. Right now they have 2 borrowings, one at 6.5% interest rate, I will say interest rate, and the loan value. One borrowing is at 6.5%, value is 400,000. Value is 400,000. Other borrowing is at 8%, and the value is 800,000. So we can calculate the interest cost on both borrowings. So interest cost on both borrowings is actually 90,000. 64,000 plus 26,000. Interest cost on both borrowings 9,000. We know the total loan value 1.2 million. So when we are capitalizing the cost of the new asset, the amount that we spend for the new asset, the borrowing rate that we need to apply is the average borrowing rate of the two existing loans. That is, we need to divide the total interest cost on both loans by the loan values. So total interest cost on both loans is 90,000 rupees. When we divide that by the total of the two loans, which is 1.2 million, we get the borrowing cost, which is 7.5%. So if you are spending 50,000 rupees for a new asset, and if you are capitalizing that new asset, the interest rate that you need to apply is 7.5%. So the correct answer would be answer 2. So question number 9. Answer 2. Right. Let's go back to the question. If investment property is measured using the fair value model, investment properties. If investment properties measured using the fair value model, the gain arising from the change in the fair value of an investment property must be credited to revaluation reserve, ignored, recognized in the calculation of profit or loss, recognized as other comprehensive income. So in the case of investment properties, and if you are using the fair value model, and if there's a gain arising from the change in the fair value, how should you treat it? How should you treat it? Basically, you have to recognize this gain when you calculate the profit or loss. So the correct answer for question number 10 is answer 3. Answer 3. Question 11. If a company adopts the revaluation method in relation to an item of property, plant, and equipment, it is no longer necessary to charge depreciation in relation to that item, true or false. That is false. Even if you adopt the revaluation method, still you need to charge depreciation. So the statement is incorrect. So 11. Question number 11, answer is 2. So we'll move into the final question for the day. Last question on property, plant, and equipment. On 1st January 2015, a company which prepares financial statements to 31st of December acquires an item of equipment and receives a government grant of 20% of the item's cost. The item costs 30,000 rupees and has an expected useful life of 7 years with a residual value of approximately 4,000 rupees. The item is depreciated on a diminishing balance basis at a rate of 25% per annum. The amount of the grant that should be recognized as income in the year 2, 31st of December 2016. So read the question again. Again, it says on 1st January 2015, a company has acquired an asset for a cost of 30,000 rupees. The residual value of this asset is 4,000 rupees and it can be used for 7 years. For the purchase of the asset, we have received a government grant of 20% of the item's cost. So 20% of the item's cost of 30,000 means 6,000 rupees. So that is the total value of the grant you have received. This asset is being depreciated based on reducing balance method at a rate of 25% per annum. Question is, how much of the grant you need to recognize as an income in the year to 31st of December 2016? Okay, I'll give you 2 minutes. Work it out. So let's work out this question. Let me go to an Excel sheet. Question 12 with regard to property, plant, and equipment, OLKS 16. Cost of the asset on 1st of January 2015, 30,000. So we know the government grant is 20%. government grant 20% of the cost. That will be 6,000. Residual value is 4,000 rupees. Lifetime is 7 years. Lifetime 7 years. And the depreciation rate is 25%. 25% reducing balance method. Depreciation rate 25% reducing balance method, RB method. Now the question is about for the year ending 31st of December 2016. So 31st of December 2016 is not the first year but the second year. So first of all we need to calculate the cumulative depreciation for both years. Let's say for year ending 31st of December 2015 and 31st of December 2016. So on both these years, let's first calculate the depreciation. First year depreciation would be from the cost 25% since there was no prior year. So first year depreciation is 7,500. Now second year depreciation would be cost minus first year depreciation because of the reducing balance method into 25%. So total depreciation would be 13,125 as at 31st of December 2016. This is the cumulative depreciation as at 31st of December 2016. So depreciation for the second year 5,625, cumulative depreciation 13,125. Now what we need to understand is second year depreciation as a percentage of depreciable value. Depreciable value. The depreciable value is the difference between cost of the asset and the residual value. Difference between cost of the asset and the residual value. So cost is 30,000, residual value is 4,000, depreciable value is 26,000. Second year depreciation as a percentage of depreciable value, I can write here. Second year depreciation as a percentage of depreciable value. Second year depreciation is 5,625. That as a percentage of depreciable value, approximately about 21.63%, or you can even take 22%. So if the second year depreciation as a percentage of depreciable value is 21.63%, how much of a government grant that you can recognize as an income? We'll say government grant that can be recognized. Government grant that can be recognized as income. So we know government grant is 6,000. Out of the 6,000 for second year, we can recognize 21.63%, which is approximately 1,298 rupees. 1,298 rupees. So let us check the answer. Let us check the answers given. Yes, the answer would be answer 3. For question number 12, the correct answer would be answer 3, exactly 1,298. Earlier I have showed you. This is how you get that answer. This is how you get that answer. 1,298. Cost of asset 30,000. You received a government grant for 20%. Residual value 4,000. Lifetime of the asset 7 years, depreciation method, residual value method. Sorry, depreciation method is reducing balance method at 25%. So for the second year, which is year ending 31st of December 2016, we calculated the depreciation, which is 5,625. So that as a percentage of the depreciable value is 21.63%. So if that is the percentage for the second year, we need to recognize that percentage of government grant as the income for that year. So 21.63% into government grant, 1,298 rupees. That is the income that we should recognize with regard to government grant for the second year. So the correct answer out of the 4 answers is answer C. Answer C. So I can say for question number 12, correct answer is answer C or answer 3 here. Third answer. Yes. So this brings to the end of today's discussion on accounting standards. So today we have discussed actually 4 standards, LKS 8, 10, 37, and also LKS 16. LKS 10 is about accounting estimates, accounting errors, and changes in accounting policies. LKS 10 was about events occurring after the reporting period, and LKS 37 was about provisions, contingent assets, and contingent liabilities. Finally, we came to LKS 16, which is about property, plant, and equipment. There also we have discussed 12 questions, so nearly 50 questions again we have discussed today. So thank you very much for being with me. So I hope this is understood by all of you. So thank you very much for your patience, and also I hope this is beneficial for you. As I have promised you, I will be discussing all the standards. Now we have only one standard remaining, which is relevant to GCA level, which is new leasing standard, which I'm going to discuss next week. So I'm going to start doing paper 2. In 2019, we have discussed paper 1. So I promised you that I'll be discussing the entire 2019 paper with you and also a few more papers. Before that, before moving into paper 2, I wanted to discuss the accounting standard. So this is a continuation of that effort. So we have completed now several accounting standards. As you know, we completed conceptual framework LKS 1, LKS 2 last week. Today we completed LKS 8, LKS 10, 37, and LKS 16, and one more standard is remaining, which is a new leasing standard. After completing that, we will move into other question discussions. Actually the questions that might come in your paper 2, including the company account, including the partnership account, and also the management accounting areas. So thank you very much for being with me. So we'll wind up today's class. If you need to clarify anything, if you want to get additional information from me, of course you have my contact numbers. I can share the earlier presentation where I have put down my contact details. My contact number is here. So if you want to clarify anything regarding what we have discussed today, feel free to contact me. And also you can watch all these videos along with the recorded video today in YouTube. Thank you very much. I'm going to wind up the class. Thank you.